All right, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. The discussion begins right now. It actually started before this discussion came on board live, but thank you so much for staying with us. Janet Muthoni-Ouko is here, former CEC for Nairobi Education. Thank you so much for making time. Yeah. Kennedy Chesa, advocate and also an education expert, is joining us online. Thank you so much for making time. And Akelo Misori is here, is the Secretary General for KUPPET. Thank you very much for making time. So Akelo, I'll start with you on this. After you had the results being announced, as a teacher yourself, are you seeing a decline or an improvement in performance?
There is no improvement in this result.
Okay.
And this one is exemplified by the fact that look at the categories of grades and the quality of grades that the learners have. In a fair contest, you would expect that we would have expected over 2,000 or 3,000 A's. That is when the curriculum is testing the category, because how many students did we have doing this exam? Then why do we have just a small cohort scoring A and a very large number scoring E? That means that the examination itself appears not to have been reliable. Because if you are going to have a reliable test for this matter, then these candidates have been there from Form 1 to Form 4, 4-year program. And if majority of the candidates who sat this exam still have the quality grades like D, which is over 400,000, it means that this examination is not reliable, and therefore it is not an improvement.
Yeah. What do you mean not reliable?
Not reliable in the sense that the curriculum seems not to have catered for all categories of learners. The reliability is where all categories of learners are falling within the normal curve. But in this one, it is skewed negatively towards the poor performance that we have. A very small peak of those who have scored grade A and A- and B+, and a very large bottom level who have scored grade D and below.
Isn't this what the grading system was supposed to address, the inequality? Because now it's just one compulsory and the best of the other four. Is that working?
I think if the grading system, the new grading system was to address this, then we would have expected a bigger performance. But this grading system, it was supposed to give room because it reduced the number of compulsory subjects. Okay. Therefore, English and Kiswahili were not now categorized as one. So they're selecting on either. Okay. It means, therefore, that what was supposed to be cured by the new grading system was not attained. Okay.
We'll get into that and talk about what you perceive as the normal curve in just a bit. But, Janet, what are your reactions to this? What are the hits and misses? How are you seeing these results? Are they an improvement or a decline?
Well, thank you very much. I think I would like to look at it from the point of that today we were expecting the Cabinet Secretary for Education to tell us how the 1,084,000 children that sat their KCPE in 2019 fared. But he only spoke about some 899,000 thereabout. Yeah. And therefore, tonight the Cabinet Secretary cannot account for the whereabouts of 184,000 children that were supposed to be exiting, through the results that we are seeing today. And so when we really sit here and ask about A's and B's and all that, and there are children who today we do not know their fate, we do not know why they dropped out of school, is it because of fees, how many of them fell pregnant, how many of them died along the way, And I think that is a kind of accountability that we have been asking of government. Considering that 184,000 is not a mean number, that's a very large number of children.
Government says 3,685
those are
registered
that did not sit. But in 2019, because this is the cohort that sat KCPE in 2019, and there were 1,084,000 thereabout. Yeah. And so today, between Form 1 to 4, where are 184 children? I think that's a very, very, very big question, and boils down to some of the issues that we have been talking. And even these 3,000 children that did not show up, for the examination, I know for sure that levies played a very big role, because there are children who've stayed away from school for about 2 terms. because of school fees and so on and so forth. There has been insecurity, somewhere. So I think really in terms of accountability and in the spirit of the right to education of every child, the Cabinet Secretary owes this country an explanation of the whereabouts of 184 children and not the 3,000 that I've heard that he has commissioned or asked, the officials of the ministry to just explain or to do an audit of where 3,000 are. No, it is not 3,000. It is 184 children that we do not know. 184,000. We don't know where those children are as we speak.
Okay, let me bring in Echesa on this. Echesa, what is your preliminary thoughts on the results that were announced?
Thank you very much, Trevor. My preliminary thoughts on the results are that these results are a reflection of our education system in the present day Kenya, a declining system. They are reflecting a struggling system. They are reflecting a dissatisfied teaching force, an underfunded system. And generally, if we had not used the new grading formula of using 1 compulsory and 2 best performed subjects, we will be shedding more tears than what we are doing now. Even though students have been helped by grading their very best 4 performed subjects, we are still witnessing a decline. Therefore, this result should be a wake-up call to the government that our education system is in a serious crisis, and if we do not address it as a matter of urgency, we are going to lose generations and generations of learners.
I think also there is something very important that we should mention about this cohort.
Yeah.
This is the COVID cohort. These are the learners that immediately entered Form 1 and schools were closed down. And so we witnessed shrinking terms, throughout all the way through, I think, Form 3. In fact, it is only in the 4th year that we now saw things stabilizing a little bit. So, I think that has been manifested a lot by the kinds of results that we are seeing today. Yeah. And so I think largely we also want to be a little soft on them because we know that they actually bore the whole throughout their secondary school life. Mm-hmm. It was really hard for them, very short terms, considering the sciences that are deep for them and so on and so forth. So I think really that could have probably contributed.
Yeah. And Akelo, as a teacher yourself, is this a system issue like Chesa is saying? Is it the system and the structure of education that doesn't work for the student? Is it the tutors who are not properly trained to teach them properly, or is it the learners themselves who don't seem to grasp these subjects? What is going on here?
It is too early to accuse the tutors who are not prepared for this category of learners, because you remember even during COVID, as my sister puts it, the performance was even better. But every exam is testing particular skills which have been taught over the period, whether we have got COVID or not. And in this circumstance, we are expected to see that even if there was COVID, what we tested was basically what was taught over this period. And therefore, I don't think there is what we call a systemic failure, because the teachers themselves put a lot of effort to ensure that the learners are given the right education. And it is true that if the teachers were not there, then we would have had poorer results. But we have other issues which are underlying, which Janet has mentioned, that nobody cares about the environment where learning takes place. And therefore, where some students left school due to the fact that they are the breadwinners in their families, or because they had been taken captive because of the running insecurity in certain regions in Kenya, which is unexplained. And therefore, you don't expect children to do that. There is also the element of poverty, which is a key indicator of performance in terms of whether if children are going to school, there is no lunch, and because of COVID, that is the main impact. Many parents lost jobs, and therefore children were not taken care of properly by their parents, because parents who lost jobs could not pay fees in time for lunch in school. The government also failed to provide capitation as required. Remember, over the period, up to the end of when the exams were being done. The capitation to school had been delayed, and in many instances, no less than 80% was disbursed to schools. So these are things which impact on the performance of learners.
Yeah.
But testing alone would not have reduced their performance this way. It is curriculum which lacks a lot of enforcement. We don't have the capacity, the capability.
I'll come to you.
We don't have the capacity, the capability to enforce the audit of what takes place in school.
Okay.
So that is what makes it is there. And if I may add, teachers are more confined to doing more paperwork in terms of TPAD, as it were, than attending to the learners. So you'll find that if you have arrived in school, your time is taken, most of your time you are doing what we call administrative work to ensure that you fill the necessary forms which the Teacher Service Commission will ascertain that you really taught in school. So those are issues which are there.
So these are necessary paperwork?
These are necessary paperwork.
Okay. Let me bring Chesa, you wanted to jump in before I bring in Janet?
Yes, I wanted to jump in and just say I blame the results on the system. Trevor, today 28,174 learners scored E's. What it means is that even our students
they were actually
sitting
twice
the
that
same
number,
exam
Chesa,
will still score an E. And therefore, government over the 4 years has spent 2.6 billion shillings to get 28,174 E's through poor policies. We have a policy in this country called 100% transition, that the ministry has insisted over time that every student sitting standard 8 must proceed to Form 1. What are the results? Today we've been able to get 28,174 E's. These students are going to go to the polytechnics and start with artisan courses and go for 2-3 years before they can do certificates and diplomas. If they had joined those artisan courses at standard 8, by this 4th year, they will be doing their higher diplomas and others would have enrolled to their degrees. So there is need to change some of these policies that the ministry has insisted. Secondly, look at the performance of individual subjects. Chemistry, biology, physics are the most affected subjects because they are practical in nature. And since there was no funding, teachers, especially in sub-county schools, could not get funds to buy chemicals and expose these learners to science subject practicals. Today, over 70% of our sub-county schools have recorded a mean of less than 3 in the science subjects. Therefore, it is an issue of policy issue, it is a system issue, a funding issue, and teachers have done their best, in my opinion. In fact, the little results we're seeing here that we can celebrate about the A's, this is purely the work of the teacher. There is no government involvement, there is no ministry involvement, it is the work of the teacher. If the teacher was to behave like government, then all of us would be saying we have over 500,000 E's in the exams that have just been released. So,
Chesa, if that is the effort of the teacher, the A's that we're talking about, yes, there are more than 1,216 of them, and the E's are actually 48,174. It's the same teachers. How can it be a teacher issue and not the learners'
because
problem?
4 years ago, the teachers advised government that these learners could not join Form 1. A learner who has 78 marks at KCPE joining Form 1, and you're expecting the same teacher to work a miracle and even get a C+. It is not possible. If government would have rethought on the policy of 100% transition, some of these E's would have been reduced positively by taking them to the necessary training centers as at that time. But we have examples also, Trevor, of students who joined secondary with 200. We have a girl at St. Anne's Musoli Girls who joined with 213 marks, and today she scored C+. So very many teachers have added value to the students who came in with low marks, but today they are living with C+, they're living with C+, they're living with D+, yet they came with 188 marks.
But that in itself then negates the point you're making.
We have avoided 4 years ago.
But it's just that then counters the same point you're making, that there are those who can still transition to secondary school with low marks but still perform well. You wanted some of them to be cut off at primary level.
Those are exceptional cases. an exception to the rule. But the general rule should be we should assess abilities of learners at every level, not just class 8, even at Form 1 or Form 2. We should be able to transit them to where they can be served well, other than wasting government resources in some specific areas where we know that we may not get the desired results. Like these are not emergencies. And you see, we have very many principals and head teachers who've been asked to respond to show cause letters by asking these learners to repeat classes in an attempt to improve their results. As a matter of policy, no learner should repeat the class, but should end up getting E in KCSE.
It's an interesting perspective that Chesa brings. Do you agree with him? I see the teachers here disagreeing completely. Let's start with you.
No.
Is it better to have just left out people who did not have the capacity to perform well?
No, I don't know that a 13-year-old, by the time they are exiting primary school, these are 13-year-olds. They don't even know that they can be carpenters. They don't know that they can be, whatever it is that they can be. The only aspect that I agree with him is that probably there are those who have gotten the grade that they have gotten because their potential has not been exploited fully. Partly because maybe there were no much resources in the school, maybe they did not attend all the days of the school, maybe the curriculum was not very well implemented at school level, and probably that is why they scored what they scored. We are not saying that there are no such errors, and we're also not saying that there are children who are even subjected to all manner of grilling or preparation. There are people who are just intellectually gifted in the manner in which they behaved probably in KCPE. But Chesa here, as a lawyer, is not telling this country that we have a constitution that guarantees every child the right to basic education. And basic education is defined in this country as all the way from ECD to secondary school. We are not likely to change that, right here. But I also think I wanted to agree with him on some various aspects, because as we sit here today, we actually do not know how much the government of Kenya today is spending per child. We do not know. The only thing we know is that today they will tell us we sent 30 billion. But there is no accountability of telling us per child. We had reached a momentum of spending 22,000 and how many hundreds? I think it was 22,300 for every secondary school child. Today, we don't know how much the government of Kenya is spending for every secondary school child.
Why? Is that because the money comes
in bits? The lack of fidelity, the money has always come in bits, ever since the introduction of the free day secondary school program. But the fidelity to send all the monies that are meant to be for education, I think is what is lacking. I really feel so bad that nowadays we're even seeing headlines of the PS saying that he is not sure that the government of Kenya can fund free education. He's not sure. And I want to tell the government today that it is not a choice. It is not a conversation we want to have with anybody, whether the government can afford or cannot afford. It is the same people that swore to protect the constitution of this country. It is not subject to conversation. It is not subject to anybody's manifesto. This is the entitlement of the children of Kenya. And so sometimes it is a little unfortunate when you see that government is where we have reached at 22,300. We are not accepting anything below that. And at primary school level, we have reached 1,400. We are only accepting going upwards. But we cannot entertain that today we don't even know how much we are spending. I've seen even Eduafia has been expunged, from the capitation. For sure, right now, the amount of money the government is spending per learner is reducing. And let me say this, for the benefit of those that like politicking about everything. We are not satisfied with big figures, 30 billion. We stopped doing that a long time ago. We are budgeting per child. So when you're talking to us, can you talk to us about how much are you spending per child? That is what makes sense to us.
Okay. All right. Mr.
Trevor, one thing that Kenya did, which is worth lauding, is that the bold step to have 100% transition. In the economics of education, somebody who has gone through the system from ECD to Form 4 has got more different perspective on life than somebody who just reached class 8 and can be transformed to do anything. But I want to hasten to add that it is true that most sub-county schools did not score well in the sciences. This is a failure by the Teacher Service Commission to ensure that staffing is rationalized. You realize that you go to a school which has done exams for 4 years, does not have a physics teacher, does not have a chemistry teacher, does not have a maths teacher. In fact, this is something which is all over this country. Yet some institutions have got more of these subjects which there are more of these teachers who teach the sciences and so on. Secondly, our infrastructure in schools is such awkward. You are expected to do a certain examination practically, but you are seeing the apparatus which have been designed for the same exams for the first time in your life during the exam period. You cannot manipulate the whole process and mix the chemicals as required to give you desired results, because even the equipment you're using or the apparatus are quite alien to the examination environment. That one you don't expect. And then lastly, there is now time, as Janet says, that there is no conversation about it. We need also to be bold that are we sure we can fund the education from the exchequer? Our public institutions are the most privatized institutions in Kenya. Privatized, and I repeat, because some of them which are boarding schools are not reachable in terms of the amount they charge for their boarding. If these schools were day schools, then every child would just learn. But to realize that children are moving from school to home to go and look for fees to fund private things, not even education issues. Because the 22,300, if it is devoted to curriculum only, it is sufficient enough. But you realize that even currently, even in the day secondary schools, you realize that some children are still sent to home, yet it is supposed to be free. Because the levies which are being charged, and a greater chunk of that levy is going to the private pockets of those people who are supplying wood, supplying unga and sugar, and maybe meat to school. When the school itself is not supposed to be a feeding center. It is this bad. And that is why we must rethink and discuss education so that we don't come here and then we start crying foul. Yeah. These students who have gotten 180 marks, these ones, when they are in under one environment which is good for learning, they will just get C. The teachers have the capacity to manipulate the environment to ensure that this one get a C. Okay. But how if you get 180 and you are the person who has no chemistry teacher, yeah. You are the person who does not have an English teacher, yeah. How will you get this grade?
Okay.
And that's why we were challenging the cabinet secretary to tell us. He told us who the A's are. Yeah. You know, he told us when he was releasing the results. He told us out of the 1,200 A's, 800 of them are from national schools. Yeah. But he did not give us the home for these E's. Who are these 48,000 E's? Where do they come from? Okay. Is there any E that is from a national school? Is there any E is from an extra-county school? The answer is no. All these E's are from the sub-county schools or the so-called day schools. And on that, you're blaming the infrastructure. Chesa, you wanted to come in, Chesa?
Yes, I wanted to differ with my educated senior, Missouri, on the issue of fee payment and accusing schools of becoming commercial enterprises. Missouri, as the national SG of COPEC, knows that most of our schools, right from, in fact, the only schools where people pay fees are the national schools. But the extra-county, county, and sub-county schools are all struggling. And when you go to their AGMs, the parents or schools money in terms of millions. Even a day school in the village, you will get parents owing the school 2 million. And I must thank members of parliament for coming in handy with CDF. Actually, by far and large, it is CDF that is running day schools in form of bursaries. Without bursaries, the sub-county and day schools will not function. The money that is paid is for lunch, which money is not even paid by more than 30% of the parents. And again, if government were to make good their promise of releasing the 22,300 per every student in every year, and at the time anticipated, actually principals and head teachers should be able to run schools without sending children home. Here is a desperate principal who has learners in a boarding school, has no food to give them. Where do you expect this principal to get money to feed the students if government has not released any funds? Yeah. And Principals have been making sufficient savings. We know of principals who have saved and put up classrooms and put up laboratories. So to condemn principals in entirety for commercializing education, it is not true, going by the balances that we see in secondary schools.
But Missouri is saying that there are some of the schools that are not even supposed to be boarding schools to begin with, right? I'll give you a right of response to what Chesa is raising.
I think maybe Mr. Chesa has not understood what I meant. I'm saying that our public schools are the largest private enterprises that you can mention. And they are now out of reach for those who cannot afford. Because, for example, if you go to some of the many schools that I'm talking about, the fees in those schools, the government is giving 22,200, 300 per child. But boarding fee alone is asking them to pay 48,000. Very many parents in Kenya cannot pay this. And that's why they owe schools a lot of money. We need to rethink education and discuss this and say that, yes, we want to provide education for all. And these 22,000 need to arrive in school. The idea of providing lunch and all these workers need not to be the burden of the parents. Okay. Because if your day school is supposed to run on 22,300, and then you are charging parents another 15,000 for the lunch of the learners throughout the year. Can't you see you are making this education out of reach for these parents who cannot pay? They cannot pay. And he is really supporting the CDF for supporting schools with money. Which bursary? Some schools, some students get bursary as low as 1,000. 1,000. And the member of parliament published this, that they have given bursary to this student. These ones are not sufficient to run schools. And in fact, bursaries are not supposed to pay for lunch. Yeah. They are basically supposed to support maybe the infrastructure in schools.
So in that scenario, what is
in this scenario, if what is expected, because in this country, Trevor, we must just be consistent with the reality of life. Okay. If the whole PS is not sure whether the funding of schools can support curriculum in schools, then it means that we have failed to discuss education in its entirety. And if it is the right of the child to be in school, then somebody must pay for it. If the government cannot even pay 22,000 and the school requires 60,000, then we must just say that we have got a serious issue of co-sharing with the parents. Okay. And therefore, this is the obligation of their parents. But once you announce that education in this school is free, and then you charge another 15,000 because of lunch, then some of our villages, parents say that, but education is free. So the child comes home, like I found one near my home, that the child is supposed to be in Form 3, but he's saying that he cannot go to school because he has not paid lunch fee of 3,800. Yeah. Look at it, and yet the government has paid 22,300 for his education in that school.
But the counter to that is if the government says that then there's a cost-sharing aspect, there are hundreds of thousands of students who will not go to school.
But that is why we are saying, that is why...
Hold on 1 second.
That is the reason for which...
Echesa, just 1 minute.
That is the reason for which... Yeah. You remember when we started, Janet said 184,000 are out and they are not accounted for. Yeah. It is because there is some fee which is supposed to be paid, and that fee is just 2,000. And they have left school because the parents does not know the value of education. Okay. The parent has left the child to go. Okay. To me, without doing a survey, I would just say that these two ones dropped out because of lack of capacity and ability to account for the right of the learner by government and by parents.
Okay, Echesa?
What I wanted to say is this. To say that the number of students who cannot be accounted for are at home because of fees, I think is being untruthful. One, we have issues of discipline. Students just disappear from schools. never to be seen again. And during KCSE, students surface, some of them surface, sit the exams. Two, the menace of early pregnancies. Many girls were unable to sit exams because they were expectant. And number three, I think
why will somebody not sit exam because they're pregnant? Why would somebody drop out because they're pregnant?
Hold on one second.
Some parents were unable to produce their children to come to school. But the point I wanted to drive home, which Akello Misori could help us know, is how much was disbursed. If he's saying that government has sent 22,000 and students are being sent home, when it is in public knowledge that government was only able to send 6,700 of the 22,000. I agree that in exceptional circumstances, we have principals who overcharge. But in 90% of our schools, the money for lunch, the reflection in the little increment is because of inflation. We cannot be charging in our schools what schools were charging in 2009 because the cost of a bag of maize and a bag of beans was much lower than it is today. And government has refused to acknowledge this. It has never increased capitation from the time capitation came into existence. Instead, as my sister Modoni has said, the government is reducing on capitation. So the issue of commercialization, I think, is defending the government unnecessarily.
Okay. You there as a CEC, what did you see?
I know that, and when there's quite a lot of work that the teachers are putting in for sure, because the government has not done so well, abandoning its role of sending money, and clearly the schools are what they are because the principals have made do. Whatever strategies the principals have used, whether it is calling parents to tell them, look here, you people, we do not have this, we do not have the other. It is in good faith that principals want schools or the schooling process to go on. That does not rule out the possibility of one or two abusing the whole process. And that is where the Ministry of Education exists, and that's why there are policies, and that's why they are the enforcing agent. But having said that, it is not acceptable, really, that we can sit here and discuss of government's failure to even send the meager amount, because really 22,400 is very little money compared to what the parents of this country are investing in education. Much as the teachers are doing much, the schools of this country are what they are because parents have put in a lot of money. Okay. And when you see the list today of the top schools, because I saw, much as the CS did not rank, the media was very quick to rank, and before you know it, we already had the top 100 schools. And if you go through those schools, they are not your common level of schools. They are 100,000 in school fees. And I want anybody who is taking their child to Mangu, to Alliance, to Moi Girls, to confirm this. It is not. And so we have established that there is a relationship between money and results. And that is a plain truth of it. And then the other issue is that what exactly are we celebrating? The entry behavior of a child that went to Alliance, they had an A already. They had 400 marks. That was an A. So when you exit with an A, I do not see cause for us to celebrate. I do not see the hula baloo. And that is why we really have made the education of this country a joke. We are so much interested in political correctness. First and foremost, it was really sad to watch today's release of the examination, sitting us down for 3 hours and every politician, saying whatever they wanted to say. Really? Is that where we want to take back the education sector? This is purely an academic exercise. Can we listen to things that add value to the process? And we are not interested really in politicizing the education sector, unless that is where, of course, the leaders want to take the sector. We do not have control over that. But I think the other issue is about funding. Okay. We do not have any other problem. We have very beautiful policies. We have a wonderful law governing education in this country. But as long as we're not going to be sending money to schools, we shall still continue to cry foul, and we shall still continue to say that the principals are overcharging. But in essence, principals are not overcharging us. Principals are just stepping, because today as we sit here, And I want any principal who has got money in their bank account to call and say that money is in our school today. Okay. But tomorrow children will be in school. Tomorrow children will eat, and there will be transactions that will be expected to have taken place. Okay. Where do we expect these principals to have gotten these resources from? And so really, for me, is just to mainstream. Looking at 15 years down the line since the inception of a free-day secondary school, what are we saying? We are saying that we are slowly losing it. We are slowly, as Kilo Missouri is putting it here, that education is almost privatized.
Yeah.
I was looking at some of the
schools are the most private.
They're the most private. Yeah. I was looking at a certain fee structure here, and you will not understand how other non-learning issues could come to 36,000. There is a uniform there, a piece of uniform, some apparels there that look like you're joining the military or something. You must come with 3 pairs of I don't know what. You must have taffy shoes. You must have. Why has the ministry lost focus as to why we are educating? Meanwhile, we are not discussing the expressway here, that those that have money can use it and those that do not can hit Mombasa Road. No. We are discussing education, a public good. We are discussing about the education of a child in Kibra today whose parents have slept even without 100 shillings because they do not have a source of income. But that child has gotten 400 marks. It is the responsibility of this country to educate that child. And we are not saying that the issue is open. You know, when we open the issue for conversation without understanding the background is, if we really want to start charging for education, we must have a referendum because it is in the Constitution. And there is nothing anybody can do about it, not even the head of state. He cannot change what education is for the children of this country. The only thing that anybody can do is to prioritize education and to fund education fully.
Okay. Let me disabuse this. We are not saying that the 22,300 which the government sent to schools is not meant to pay for lunch. Is not meant to pay for maize or sugar. It is basically supposed to support the learning in the school. And that's why I'm saying that our public institutions are highly privatized, because what goes in running the boarding is so expensive. And therefore, you cannot expect, I'm not talking about abuse, you cannot expect a Kenya High School, which has to cook with gas and electricity, to charge 48,000 shillings to run, with the workforce in the school of over 150. Workforce which is not related to teaching. They are only supporting the running of boarding component. So the government has not even taken care of that.
Yeah.
That is taken care of by parents. And that's why I'm saying that parents who cannot afford, even if their children are admitted at Kenya High, they cannot go. Okay. Because initially that was a high-cost school, and it has to maintain the tradition. So many schools of that nature are operating on that level. That is what Janet is saying. Okay. Now, coming home, we must say that there is inequality in our institutions, because going by what the Teacher Service Commission does, a school which is a sub-county can stay with 400 students, can have only 8 teachers. A normal school with 400 students should have at least 17 teachers. But in some regions, in many of our schools, that is what obtains. And the teachers lacking in these schools who are lacking are basically in key areas like sciences, mathematics, and languages. So we have to rethink about how to bridge the gap, and then how to ensure that we talk about education on a serious note, so that we tell the public the truth. That the truth is here that you cannot afford to give you teachers. Therefore, you must employ your own teachers. Okay. That is what's happening. In some schools, there is a school which I don't want to mention here, which has the enrollment of only 35 teachers, with Form 4 alone having 670 students. But they only have 35 teachers. They have employed another 35 teachers to bridge the gap so that they have 70.
Okay.
So that is what is obtaining. Yet there are some schools in this country which do not need to employ any single teacher.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So how can you gauge the performance?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why even when you have one national school selected, giving a student a chance, then they still want to go to another national school. It should be that all national schools are equal in terms of staffing, infrastructure, and everything that contribute to education or learning in that school.
HS, as we wind up on this conversation, so where do we go from here? Because we know now a total number of candidates of 889,453 received their results today. Out of that, close to 73% actually, about 694,400 did not achieve the university grades. In fact, only 201,000 are going to go to the university. So where do we go from here now? What happens to those who are the more than 694,000 who did not make it to the university cutoff? And what is the best approach going forward?
I think we need to reflect on the results, and the reflection will basically tell us to, one, invest in education. Let the year 2024 be a different year. The minister has said that he has released 30 billion, but we can confirm to Kenyans that not a single school has received any funding so far, yet schools will be opening tomorrow. The ministry need not operate on lies this year, but operate on truthfulness. Number two, we need to rethink about our policies, and I'm still concerned with the policy of 100% transition. Transition to where? We are transiting students into the world of ease and ease, which may not be very useful. Number three, the Teacher Service Commission needs to review their CBEs, curriculum-based establishment. And as Missouri has said, we need to resource our schools in terms of teachers. Most, if not all of our schools are understaffed. Today, we are seeing letters being dished right, left to members of parliament. And these members of parliament are sending these teachers to specific schools, which means even as a school, if you're not well known within TSC or within the corridors of parliament, you will continue being understaffed. For employment is now taking part in villages, and posting of teachers has been delegated to members of parliament. Lastly, let us celebrate all the learners. As Janet has rightly put it, students who went to Alliance High School, to Mangu High School, to national schools, Butere Girls, they went there with 400 marks and above. That was already an A. So we don't expect anything from all the students other than A. Let us celebrate the students who went to these sub-county schools, village-based schools with very little marks, and they have come out with C-, C+, C plain, and support them even at middle-level colleges to achieve their dreams and achieve their goals.
Okay. Janet?
Yeah, I think moving forward, the sector is really craving for policy direction. Policy direction, number one, on junior secondary school, because I know that a lot of them are still wondering, do we do uniforms? And, you know, for those transiting to junior secondary school, and the confusion is just so much. And at this point is where we would want the cabinet secretary to just arrest that madness, because a blazer is going at 3,000 Kenya bob. So if we allow every junior secondary school to now fashion, you know, some uniform, then we will still be putting another barrier over there. So I think policy direction would really come in very handy. And also the whole question of capitation. We do not want to hear 30 billion. We want to know, are we doing 22,400 for secondary school? Are we doing 15,000 for junior secondary school and 1,400 for primary school? Or what exactly is this government's commitment, you know, per child? And finally, is about where is every child, you know? As we have seen, as of today, we cannot account for 184,000. Can we say, by the time we are sitting 2024, the KCSE, shall we also have an account of those, the cohort that's at 2020, so that then this 100% transition, which unlike Wakili here, I fully support, because there is no child that should be left behind. Whether they're intellectually challenged, we should find ways of working with them. Whether they're financially challenged, we should find ways of working with them. And finally, is that we really would admire if the government could spend where most children are. And most children are attending day schools. Let the government spend on day schools. I have seen something about bursaries. They have been increased and so on. We cannot educate our children using bursaries. That is tokenism. And that is what we are saying. We do not want tokenism in education. There are tested models for funding education across the globe. Everybody is going the capitation way. Can you imagine this country? We are decreasing capitation and adding bursaries because we want to remain political, because we want to remain tokenist, because we want to be seen as if we are working and abandoning systemic ways that have worked. We do not agree with that at all.
Okay. Okay.
100% transition is an excellent, bold step that the Kenya government took because basic education is a right. And secondly, I would say that the rest of the group that are not going to the university is not supposed to go to the oblivion. We should not have obsession with university education. That is where we have the TVET institutions. A river, so many rivers have got sources and they finally end up in the ocean. And I think this is the high time that we strengthen our TVET institutions and we encourage our learners to go to TVET institutions so that they can learn skills so that they can be useful to the society. To pay teachers well and also employ more teachers. We have got no way out. Pay teachers well and employ more teachers, because that is what will salvage. As learners with teachers is better than learners with just equipment.
Okay.
Yeah, learners with teachers, yes.
And there's an interesting perspective here from Ted Munovi. Munovi here says that, hello Trevor, the 694,000 figure obscures one basic question. Is the purpose of our education system just to get learners to university? What is the purpose of education? To transit knowledge, culture, and values from one generation to the next, and also impart skills to our populace, not necessarily university graduates.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's bring up some of the feedback here as we wind up on this conversation. Thank you so much for watching and Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report and let's see what you're saying here. And that is Mwangi Babu. He says that the education ministry should invest heavily in the middle-level colleges. These institutions should be fully funded and be provided with adequate state-of-the-art facilities that can go a long way in churning out full-baked artisans who currently are in high demand. Okay? See what else you're saying here. Mark says, can we have a holistic focus on education, university and all other middle-level colleges and TVET? This will give us a clear picture on those missing out. We need to go back to diploma colleges for a stopgap too. Okay. And Victor here finally says the 2023 KCSE results are encouraging, but those who missed university entry grades are alarming in numbers. Okay. All right, that's where we leave it for now. Thank you so much for watching Citizen TV's Monday Report. Janet Mudhoni-Ouko, former CEC Education, Nairobi. Thank you so much for making time. Kennedy Achesa, advocate and also an education expert at Asante Sana for making time. Nakelo